is now 7 p.m. on Wednesday the 26th July 2023, so I declare this ordinary meeting of Council open. Before I commence the proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge the ongoing contribution the Wadawurrung make to the life and spirit of our community. Item 2, present and apologies. We have apologies from Gihan, from an officer perspective, our Manager of Finance and Corporate Services, and a late apology from Councillor Grigau. There were no other apologies. CEO, thank you. Item 3, pecuniary interest and conflict of interest disclosures. Councillors, do I have any disclosures?
Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst. I do have a conflict of interest in item 20.9, which is actually in the confidential items, due to a close family relationship, who is a director of one of the applicants with the community grants. Also note I did declare that conflict during the grant process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Any further conflict of interest disclosures? No. Thank you. Item 4, leave of absence of councillor. None. Item 5, public question time. Item 5.1, public question status update. At the ordinary meeting of Council on 28 June 2023, a follow-up question was taken on notice. The answer is provided at length in adjunct 5.1. There are no other public questions outstanding. Item 5.2, public questions. So tonight we have 9 public questions that have been received by Council within the prescribed timelines. Question 1 comes from Kelvin Granger and Dean Hurlston of Council Watch, who I don't believe are in the audience, so on their behalf I'll read out the question. That's, can Council please advise the dollar amount of costs shifting from state government they estimate they incurred in the 2022-23 financial year? And I'll invite the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I will take that question on notice and write directly to Council Watch.
Thank you, Martin. Question number 2 comes from the Point Lonsdale Basketball Association. Would you like to read your question out? Yes, so you just come up to the lectern if you don't mind. We can provide you with a copy if you want to read it directly. Welcome.
We'd like to discuss the lack of basketball infrastructure in the borough and bring to your attention the plans for growth in basketball across the borough. We'd also like to schedule a special meeting to discuss our project in depth if possible.
We would be really happy to schedule such a meeting with Council. Thank you for seeking to have a meeting to update us on the work you're doing, so we'll make contact at the conclusion of this ordinary meeting to schedule a time where you and your representatives can meet with Council to present that information.
Thank you.
Public question 3 comes from Tim McAvoy. Is Tim here tonight? No? Tim's question is, I wondered if council officers were pursuing the person who has removed large trees and vegetation from the front of a property and outside their fence line on the Crow's Nest estate. Surely legal or police action has to take place. It is not just a clean-up of deadwood and grass, but removal of everything. I'll invite the Manager for Infrastructure and Environment, Stuart Hanson, to respond.
Good evening, Councillor Tolhurst and councillors. Council was made aware of illegal clearing of native vegetation on the foreshore Crown land behind Crow's Nest Place. In accordance with Council's vegetation vandalism policy and corresponding procedures, officers have sourced all available information and filed a formal police report, notified the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, DEGA, who have commenced an investigation into breaches of the Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act and the Marine and Coastal Act. Officers have submitted an application for consent under the Marine and Coastal Act to erect 2 large signs regarding the vegetation vandalism and to install temporary fencing around the area to prepare for revegetation. Officers have also sent correspondence to all surrounding residents providing notification of the incident and seeking information they may have. Council is not aware of any charges or fines that have been issued to date.
Thank you, Stuart. Public question 4 comes from the Friends of Victoria Park. David Kenwood, if you'd like to read your question.
This relates to the new policy proposed for Victoria Park and Queenscliff. After reading the agenda and attached appendices, read the proposed changes to the policy and plans for Victoria Park due to be discussed here at the council meeting tonight. We believe that a number of issues need further clarification. What is the definition of an event worthy of council's discretion? Council's discretion is a nebulous term. Who is able to make this judgment, e.g. the mayor, a majority of councillors, or if a council officer, at what level? The times available for camping in the restricted camping area are not specified apart from the QMF and hot rod events. The maps in Appendix 13.1.1 is a 2022 version and fails to include what we understand to be the proposed open spaces and picnic table areas as shown in map appendices 13.2.1, which in turn fails to differentiate the restricted and general camping areas. None of the maps show a designated area for the garden area at the park entrance. Given we have only had 2 days notice of the revised policy, we request that the issue be deferred and allow these issues and others to be clarified.
Thank you, David. And because this is an item for consideration in the agenda, I'll respond following Council's deliberations on items 13.1 and 13.2. The next question, public question number 5, comes from Christine Rees, who I can't see here, so I'll read her question. As a resident of BoQ, I volunteer with Borough Coast Carers, Swan Bay Environment Association and Friends of Hooded Plover to restore the natural environment for everybody to enjoy. I feel disappointed and unsupported by the Council due to some recent decisions and inactions on the Council's part with the following. 1. Filling of wetland at 6 McDonald Road. 2. Removal of vegetation, Moona and Bubiella trees on Crown land in front of 16 Crow's Nest Place. Coastal Moona woodland listed as a threatened community under the Flora and Fauna Act, Guarantee Act 1988. And 3. Dogs off leash along our beaches, particularly in the marine park where the hooded plovers nest. Hooded plover listed as vulnerable under the EPBC Act. Unfortunately, we have residents who undermine the good efforts of the volunteering groups. These residents willingly destroy local habitats and continue to flaunt council rules and legislation. EPBC Act 1999, the Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act 1988, Flora and Fauna Guarantee Amendment Act 2019 and Wildlife Act 1975, knowing there will be no consequences for their actions from council. When will the council staff take seriously their responsibility to protect our environment under the Planning and Environment Act 1987 and the environmental legislation? Will council prosecute the residents for removing the protected Moona woodland, start issuing fines instead of warnings to dog owners, fine residents who do not apply for the appropriate permits before undertaking earthworks on their properties, instead of accepting reports, only taking into consideration hydrology after the works have occurred. I'll invite the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I would start by saying Council do take their responsibilities very seriously, but I do note that every situation needs specific response, and that we're also working within the resourcing capacity of Council. So I can understand sometimes the community does get frustrated. Council officers do and will continue to undertake enforcement where there's been a clear breach of legislation, where we are the authorised entity and there is evidence to support prosecution. I'll talk to the vegetation removal at Crow's Nest first. So Council has reported the incident, as Stuart's already indicated, and forwarded all the available information to the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action. It's worth noting that Council is not a delegated as an authorised officer under the State's Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act or the Commonwealth's Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act. Council is unable to issue infringements or perform compliance role within those specific acts. Council has requested a meeting with the relevant department officers to receive an update on the investigation into the alleged Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act breaches. As Stuart already mentioned, Council has also made a police report with respect to the criminal damage. And again, just repeating what Stuart said, we have sought consent from the department to erect signage on the site in accordance with our policy, and we will continue and we will take responsibility for the revegetation activities once we get that consent. With respect to the finding of dog owners, officers spend a considerable amount of time proactively patrolling local dog restriction laws, including beach dog restrictions. Just as an example, 17 infringements have been issued in the last 12 months for breaches of dog laws. Council officers worked in collaboration with Parks Victoria Rangers during 2022 and 23 and continue to do so to increase visibility and responsiveness against dog owners who breach dog restrictions in the Marine National Park where hooded plovers nest. We've also reviewed the dog restricted signage throughout the borough in conjunction with Parks Victoria, especially in the Marine National Park, and this, as everyone knows, this area is managed by National Parks Act 1975, and we will be putting up new dog restriction signage, and that will be in place before December 2023 to improve visibility and address some of the concerns that have been raised about the inconsistency amongst those signs. With respect to 6 McDonald Road, I'll provide a detailed response to the questions about the legality of the earthworks in writing.
Thank you, Martin. That brings us to public question 6 from the Queenscliff Community Association. David, would you like to read your question out? Thank you. In relation to the visually confronting, highly intrusive and non-heritage EV Bowser stations in front of Town Hall, can each councillor tonight explain whether they actively considered alternative locations and designs for the EV Bowsers in light of very strict heritage provisions, design requirements and overlay protections, and individually detail in their response what considerations you as councillors specifically investigated to enable and accept that council had absolutely no option in protecting its valued heritage that restricts and guides every other property owner in these heritage overlays. I have been asked to issue a response on behalf of the councillors tonight, and note that councillors, when presented with the current location for the EV chargers in an assembly in 2022, late in 2022, as the recommendation of council officers, did not object to the site and ultimately supported the recommendation. This recommendation was based on the examination of 5 other locations around Point Lonsdale and Queenscliff that were ruled out due to having insufficient space for reversing up to the charges, a lack of access to appropriate power supply, a lack of access to public facilities such as toilets and shops, and being exposed to the elements that result in corrosion. The installation of these EV chargers is not yet complete, and further landscaping works and skins being applied is likely to take place in the coming months to complete that job. I'll take a clarifying question, David, but not another question. I'll take that on notice and happily provide a response in writing. Public question number 7 is from David Connolly. Would you like me to read this one as well? The ATS contains the statement making the Borough of Queenscliff the first 30-kilometre municipality in Australia. Includes, together with Ratio, the consultants appointed to develop the strategy, council officers work to produce a draft version of the document to take to our community for feedback. I ask who specifically inputted into the ATS the 30-kilometre limit recommendation. Ratio, another consultant, council officers, the CEO, a reference group or interested party, or councillors. The CEO and the Mayor will provide a response to this, and I'll let the CEO commence that response.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So, David, during the initial round of consultation, which commenced in early 2022, and included submissions from about 495 community members, 6 key themes emerged and were documented in an engagement outcomes and themes paper, which Council published in September 2022. Theme 6 in the paper was family safe and active streets. This theme was developed because, amongst other matters, many submissions highlighted the need to provide safer speeds, including area-wide 30-kilometre or 40-kilometre speed limits in local streets. In response to the community submissions, the consultants included a recommendation to trial a 30-kilometre speed limit to facilitate safe and active streets.
And I would just add that, as we've previously noted, the 30-kilometre proposal was part of testing ideas and strategies that were raised throughout the consultation process and initial surveys and engagements with the stakeholder groups that we've then serviced back to community in the draft version of the document. Many of the parties you mentioned in your question, David, including councillors, council staff and Ratio, alongside community and relevant stakeholders, had a role in contributing to the draft document that was presented back to the community for consultation, and they have, as you well know, provided a wealth of extremely valuable feedback about all the strategies contained in that document, which is the revised version of which is coming to our August meeting at this stage. The response indicates that it was a collaborative. I'll take those follow-up questions on notice as well, David, but the response indicates it was collaborative and an idea that was surfaced in the stakeholder engagement workshops and throughout the surveys. Council has put the document to the public and approved the version that made it to the public when it was adopted back in February, if I remember correctly. Pardon me, not adopted, put out for consultation. I'll move on to public question number 8. In relation to the ATS draft, question 8 comes from Raylene McDonald, who I also can't see in the audience, so I'll read the question out on her behalf. And that is, in relation to the ATS draft and the feedback that was received from the original draft, will there be an opportunity for the ratepayers, community members, to view the updated draft and provide further feedback? If we are not able to view these changes and provide further feedback prior to council voting on it, can you please explain why? And I'll get the CEO to respond to this in the first instance.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So, council officers have prepared an updated draft of the active transport strategy, which takes into consideration all of the submissions received during consultation. Council officers presented the proposed changes to councillors at a recent council assembly. Council is now reviewing the proposed changes and will provide feedback to council officers before the update is finalised. I think you wanted to follow that up.
I would just add that Councillor's intention is to release the document for the community to view at least a week before the August ordinary meeting, when the revised strategy is scheduled to be endorsed by councillors. This is not planned to be a formal secondary consultation process, as council will have incorporated the feedback into this version. However, comments, questions or concerns can be put to council, as is the case with any draft or adopted strategy. Public question number 9 comes from Jane Abbott. Question RE filling in of wetland in McDonald's Road. Can councillors and all relevant council officers look again at what has happened in filling with fill of unknown composition, in spite of it being clean fill from Ocean Grove, of this wetland intimately adjacent to Lakers Cutting? Retrospective before and after hydrology study after 6 years and assessment is completely untenable. There was no environmental assessment of flora, fauna, which may well have been protected and endangered species. Migratory birds from the northern hemisphere would have rested and fed there, as they do on the adjacent landowner's property. My understanding is that the CEO approved this action, and I question how this could have been done. What action and further investigations will officers and councillors take to address this serious unauthorised destruction of fragile habitat as a matter of urgency and environmental responsibilities? And I'll get the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the property's located on land zoned rural conservation zone, and there are requirements under that zone for different permits for different activities. The zone itself only requires a permit for earthworks in the following circumstances: earthworks which change the rate of flow or the discharge point of water across a property boundary, earthworks which increase the discharge of saline groundwater. So none of those activities were occurring. The Stanek report that's referred to in the question confirmed that under the circumstances, no planning permit was required for those earthworks. Unfortunately, there are no other triggers, including the potential Ramsar listing for Lakers Cutting, that would have required a planning permit application in 2016 when the works occurred. I'm happy to provide a more detailed response into some of the other historical matters raised in the question. I'll do that in writing.
Thank you, Martin. That brings us to the conclusion of public questions for tonight, and thanks to all those who either virtually or in the gallery submitted those this evening. Item number 6 is confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. 6.1, Ordinary Council meeting held on 28 June 2023. We have a recommendation that the minutes as distributed be confirmed as an accurate record. Do I have someone to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. I've got a seconder in Councillor Minty. All in favour? Thank you. All opposed? I'm sorry, abstaining because you weren't present. Pardon me.
I wasn't present at the meeting, so I've got no idea whether the minutes are an accurate reflection. Ask Councillor Grigel.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. Shall I record your vote as abstained? Thank you. Item 7, record of informal meetings of councillors. The recommendation here is again that the list presented in adjunct to item 7 be noted. Do I have a mover for that item? Thank you, Councillor Minty. Moved and seconded by Councillor Ebbels. All in favour? Thank you. Passed unanimously. Item 8, notice of motion. 8.1, notice of motion status update. No notices of motion are outstanding. 8.2, motion on notice. No notices of motion were received. Item 19, petitions and 9, petitions and joint letters. No petitions or joint letters were received. Item 10, functions attended. So council was represented at a number of functions between 22 June and 19 July this year, and the recommendation here is that this functions attended list be received. I have a mover, Councillor Ebbels. I'm happy to second the motion. All in favour? Thank you, so passed. Item 11, Chief Executive Officer. 11.1, Chief Executive Officer Report for July 2023. And I'll hand over to Martin to talk to his report.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I will take the report as read and happy to take any questions that councillors might have. The recommendation is that council receive the CEO's report. Can I have a mover?
I'm happy to move it, and I do have a question.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. I'll come back to your question. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Minty. Councillor Ebbels, put your question.
Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst. Just in regard to the Victoria Resilient Coast Grant, I'm just wondering, I'm presuming that include all the coastal area within the borough, including Swan Bay, and I was just wondering about, obviously, in recent times with Shortlands Bluff, with the bit of a fail we've had there. So it would include all areas in the borough, whether it's Crown land or not?
Through you, Mayor. This funding applies to the ocean side, and then also the Lonsdale Bight around to the cutting would be the description. The study itself will only apply to those areas that are identified as cliff areas. So the Point Lonsdale heads underneath the lighthouse and around to around to the playground area there, and then Shortlands Bluff itself, including the area where we recently had a slide.
Councillor Minty, as the seconder, did you wish to speak to the motion or ask a question?
No, not at this stage. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Minty. Are there further questions for the CEO on this report? I wish to ask about two of the matters raised here, and that is around the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee. Expressions of interest for this have just recently closed, in which we were seeking 2 community members to join that committee. I wonder if at this stage you're able to provide an update on how many applications we received and when the outcome of that is likely to be known and shared with the public.
Thank you, Mayor. I might defer to Tim. Do you have... Sorry, Tim advised the Mayor that applications closed on the 21st of July. We haven't had a chance to go through and have a look to see how many applications we received, but we will be taking that to the next MEMC meeting for consideration, or do we make that decision? Yep, so we'll make a decision out of session. Yep.
Thank you very much. And then the second question was around the Vic Resilient Coast Grant and the cliff stabilisation work, and what, if any, intersections this has with our coastal marine management plan that's in development.
Thank you for your question, Mayor, and through you. There is a lot of intersections, or there are a lot of intersections with the CMMP. If a CMMP was in place, this would probably this work would probably constitute one of the actions that you would have in a CMMP. Because it's happening prior to that, it'll actually feed into the final CMMP document. So yeah, it is interlinked.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions for the CEO, I'll put this to the vote. So all in favour of receiving the report. Councillor Gratt, do I register your... Sorry, we're voting on this matter. Not a problem. So I'll call for the vote again. All in favour of receiving the report? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 12, Health and Wellbeing. 12.1, G21 Regional Football Strategy, and I'll hand over to the CEO to talk to this item.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. That's my neck. Thank you, Councillor Rebels. Through you, Mayor. It's timely that we're receiving this report tonight, given the Women's World Football Cup that's on at the moment, and I know we're all excited to see how the Australians proceed in that. But this is a document that really just sets out a strategy for the region. It recognises the growth of interest in the sport, and the support that's needed to make sure that growth continues, in particularly in women's participation. So I will take the report as read and happy to receive any questions you may have.
So the recommendation is that the Council endorses the G21 Regional Football Strategy and places the strategy on public exhibition for 6 weeks in line with other councils in the G21 region. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Minty, and I have a seconder in Councillor Ebbels. Councillor Minty, did you wish to speak to the motion or ask any questions?
I would like to speak to the motion, Mayor. I think, if I may, having reading the particular proposal that I think is very well researched, and whilst those who from the borough who actually read the information, it may look like there is not a large number of men, women, boys or girls playing the game within the borough. I think it's beholding on the borough to ensure that it does or can provide direction to young people and older people who want to play the game, because there are a lot of people who, I mean, it's probably the fastest growing game going around at the moment. So I think that there should be facilities available, and this requires land. It also requires money to be spent. But it's beholding on the borough to be able to let its residents know, whether through schools, association or clubs, where they can go and play this game, because there is no doubt in my mind that it will and is a game of the future for our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Minty. Councillor Ebbels, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Councillor Tolhurst, and probably reiterating Councillor Minty's words, but I think it's important that we do have, maybe not within the borough, soccer fields, but make sure that we continue to advocate for soccer fields that are a close proximity to the residents of the borough. So, for example, I know there are 2 soccer fields in Colindine, Ocean Grove, and also some in Drysdale. It would be good for us to continue to advocate for more soccer fields on the Ballerine, which will certainly obviously help our local residents, both young and old.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Councillor Gratt?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this. I think the proposal's good. I'm really pleased to see this review. I was involved in the one 20 years ago, out of which we got 2 fields in Colindino. At the time, the growth in soccer was quite large, and I remember having a look at the figures back then, and I was advocating for 2 fields rather than 1, which I'm very pleased they put two pitches in place, because I think within 5 years that wasn't a sufficient resource for the number of people that wanted to play soccer. So good to have a review like this, and coming out of this, I'm hoping that there'll be a recognition of the enormous growth for this sport in our region. there's a lot of families and children particularly who would choose to play soccer rather than footy. So it would be really appropriate that we provide those facilities for them.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. I'll just add a few comments in prior to putting the discussion or recommendation to the vote, and that is, put simply, this is part of being in the G21 forum. The sport is growing, although our population represented here may not be massive compared to the four other councils on G21, but this is part of a regional approach to growth, to development, to sensible design in growth and development, and to doing things in a financially sound way for future generations and current ratepayers and residents. So with that, I'll put the recommendation to put this out to public consultation to the vote. All in favour?
No.
Thank you. Carried unanimously. Brings us to item 13, Environment, and 13.1, Review of Victoria Park Policy.
Mayor Tolhurst, if I may, I'd like to move that we defer item 13.1, the review of Victoria Park Policy CP054. Councils are seeking further and clear clarification and some possible further changes. So I move that we move it to the August ordinary meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Ebbels' motion? Councillor Grout, seconded.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak to that too.
Councillor Ebbels, did you wish to speak further to it now we've got a seconder?
No further, because I have deferred it. Asked for it deferred.
Okay, we're going to defer it, so therefore not speak to the motion as per. I'm not sure what it's per. But noting we're not addressing the item, I will move, noting deferral to August, I will move to item 13.2. Oh, sorry, of course, thank you. So we've got a motion before us to defer the consideration of this item until August. All in favour? That's passed unanimously, thank you. Thanks for keeping me on track. Item 13.
Sorry, Mayor Tolhurst, we do need to just address.
I was going to address the
Kenwoods.
question at 13.2, given that both items are related to the update of the Victoria Park Policy. If you're comfortable with that, David, I think it would be sound to address that after we manage this item. Thank you for the reminder. 13.2 is the Victoria Park planting schedule. Councillor Gratt?
Yeah, I'd like to move a motion that's different to what's written here and to align with what we've just done. So I'm going to move that Council defers the Victoria Park planting schedule 22-23 to correctly align with the policy.
Seconder for the motion in Councillor Ebbels. And having deferred it, I'll now put that recommendation of deferral also to August. Can I clarify, Councillor Gratt, in line with?
Please.
So I'll put that motion to defer the schedule in addition to the policy to the vote. All in favour? Thank you. That's passed unanimously. And therefore, David, in response to your question, councillors have resolved to defer a decision or adoption of the revised Victoria Park Policy and accompanying a planting schedule to the August meeting. I'll take that one on notice for consideration amongst the councillors. Thank you. Item 14, local economy. There are no reports to consider. Item 15, heritage planning and infrastructure. Item 15.1, planning permit activity report, and we've got Tim, our manager of infrastructure and community safety, to present the report.
Thank you, councillors. For the planning, and so on. For the planning permit activity report as of the 18th July 2023, I take the report as read. I just want to add the following comments in relation to this month's report and going forward. So we've added the Section 72 amendments to this report. We've removed the secondary consent amendments, and that was really in response to some public questions last council meeting in relation to a planning permit, and also the fact that the 72 amendments are subject to advertisement, and it gives more information for the community and people who read these reports. And secondary consents of a minor nature, not subject to advertisement. Also just like to add, we've done some communications around this, that for the new planning portal that the borough is using, it's called Greenlight, which will be going live next week. That will contain a register which will contain all the planning permits, including BitSmart, everything there for people's reference.
Thank you, Tim. The recommendation is that the report as it's presented be received. I'm happy to move that motion. If I have a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Are there questions? I don't have any questions or comments.
Just one question and one comment. The comment first is I know Council and some of our residents will be heading to online for the VCAT hearing the next couple of days. I just wanted to wish everyone best of luck with that, and I know you'll fight the fight on behalf of Council and the residents. And also just in regard to the portal, you talked about with having all the planning applications online. I understand that you can also, it will be easier for people who want to go in and basically submit an objection for that permit as well as part of that process. So trying to streamline that and keep it all into one portal, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. So Greenlight is well used across local councils in Victoria, and I know our planners this week in testing it have been really impressed with it, and I'm sure the community will find it a far more user-friendly planning portal that we currently have.
And this was part of our ICT upgrade package, wasn't it? In conjunction with some other councils.
That's correct. So we've done this as a joint project with the two Grampians councils.
Excellent, thank you.
Do other councillors wish to speak to the motion or ask Tim questions about the report before us? Thank you, Councillor Minty.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate council officers on bringing this new portal into being. It has been for many years, as you know, for council and CEO, the same that there was a certain frustration within the community that they couldn't gather this information, and it must have been a tremendous pull on council officers' time to get the data together and actually man what is effectively a counter for that type of information to be passed and discussed. This way it's a much smoother operation, and I think it's not before time, but these things do come when they come, and Tim, I think it's terrific. Well done, congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Minty. Are there any further comments, questions? I'll then put that the planning permit activity report be received for this month. All in favour? Thank you. That's passed unanimously. The traffic light party. That brings us to item 16, governance and finance. 16.1, councillor portfolios and committee appointments. And I think in the first instance we'll get the CEO to speak to this, if there's comment to be made.
No, just as some background before we get into the agenda item itself. So as the community would know, it's usually every November we do a review of portfolios, delegations and elections of mayors and deputy mayors. With the recent resignation of Councillor Hewitt and Councillor Minty coming on board, we just need to do a review of those portfolios, delegations, and for Council to consider whether or not they want to appoint a deputy mayor. So I'll hand it over to the councillors.
Thank you, Martin. So we'll address item A, the nomination and election of a deputy mayor, distinct from items B to F. So in the first instance, in addressing item A, I'll call for nominations for the position of deputy mayor. I'll make a nomination of Councillor Ross Ebbels for the position and then call for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Minty. Were there any further nominations for the position of Deputy Mayor? With that, I announce you duly elected, as there are no other nominations for the position.
Thank you very much, Mayor Tolhurst.
Would you like to speak
I'd
briefly
just
to
like
that
to say
appointment?
that, yeah, obviously the role of Deputy Mayor is certainly to support the Mayor, and I think it's important that we have a good working relationship with the Mayor and councillors, and I'm always ready to step in and help the Mayor where necessary. And if the Mayor wanted to have a holiday, I probably didn't do when I was the Mayor, so I think it's important that if you do want to have a holiday, that it's a seamless process where I can step in and during that period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. We'll now proceed to address items B to F. So is there someone who wishes to put a motion forward and appoint those positions and delegations?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Tolhurst. I will run through the change that we have in items B to F. So certainly under the portfolios, a slight change with the health and wellbeing portfolio being taken up by Councillor Minty. The environment, local economy, heritage planning and infrastructure stays the same, and Councillor Grigau to take on the portfolio of governance and finance. In the Audit and Risk Committee, Councillor Grout and Tolhurst remain on, and we add as the governance and finance portfolio holder, Councillor Grigau to the Audit and Risk Committee. The CEO Employment and Remuneration Advisory Committee remains the same. The next item in the forum, the changes are under the Barwon Southwest Local Government Waste Forum. The vacancy will be replaced with Councillor Minty. The sub-rep for the Geelong Regional Library Corporation Board, we're using Councillor Minty for that one. Also, the other change in that area is the G21 Sustainability Pillar. The vacancy will be filled by Councillor Minty. Under the Council Reference Groups, the Coastal Marine Management Plan Steering Committee, currently it's Councillor Grout, and the vacancy will be replaced by myself, Councillor Ebbels. They're the changes and updates, Mayor Tolhurst. Thank you. Happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Do I have a seconder for that motion? All those appointments. Thank you, Councillor Minty. Councillor Ebbels, did you wish to speak further on?
No, just sorry, I was going to say no, now I'm talking about it, but just to, as the CEO mentioned, that obviously at the end of, I think it's late November, we do go through all the delegations again, so this is to fill in those vacancies till we have another look at it in November. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ebbels. Councillor Minty, did you wish to speak to it as our new councillor with now an official portfolio?
Thank you, Mary. Yes, I would. Not that you get the opportunity all that often to speak to or to be able to support people in a health and wellbeing portfolio without, of course, having medical background. So the area that I see as extraordinarily important, not only for our ageing population or our older people who are residents within the borough, but also for young people, and also we're talking about physical activity, diet and support, which is extremely important. It's an area which I think the council has always done very well in. I was looking at the reports on about what our citizens think of our performance in these areas. So it is a fairly high bar that's been set, but I look forward to the challenge and also those subcommittees, which I think are extremely important so that people understand that the small business at the end of the Bellarine Peninsula has a position on most of these things. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Minty. Are there other councillors that wish to speak for or against this motion? No. With that, I'll put the recommendation as prescribed to the vote. So all in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item 16.2, Audit and Risk Committee extension of appointment of current independent members. Did we have an officer speaking to this?
Thank you, and through you. This is an important piece of housekeeping. We're in the process, or we will commence a process for recruitment as we reconsider who should be on our Audit and Risk Committee, and that's the independent members. But Council has recognised that the formal end of the current term is in August, and that's prior to the adoption and endorsement of all the end of financial year reporting. And Council recognised that it was important that we try and have some continuity in that process, and so we're extending the current term by the 2 months there to make sure that we A, have recruited the new members, and B, that we have the current Audit and Risk Committee look at the end of year papers.
Thank you, Martin. So the recommendation before us is, as Martin said, that Council 1 extend the appointment of the following persons as independent members of the ARC: Roland Barney Orchard, Graham Phipps, Richard Bull and Helen Butteris to 25 October 2023. And the second part of this recommendation is that we note the public advertisement seeking expression of interests in becoming an independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee, and that this will commence on the 28th of August 2023. Do I have a mover for that motion, recommendation? Councillor Grout, many thanks. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Councillor Grout, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to say that I think it's important we get some turnover in our Audit and Risk Committee so we have better review of both our borough finances but also of the risk, and that we're able therefore to manage those risks more appropriately. This council, I think, is in need of having good quality expert advice about both those issues from an independent group of people for us to function effectively.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. Councillor Ebbels, did you wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Minty? Or if there, I'll call for further comments. Thank you. Before I put it to the vote, I'll just thank the 4 committee members who've been with us in some cases for a very long time, and thank them for that service and commitment. I really heartily encourage people to submit an expression of interest. This is a really important, as Councillor Grout said, committee for Council, and putting this expression to interest out and seeking renewal of 4 members is about acknowledging the risk profile that was instituted as part of the implementation of the Local Government Act 2020. It brought risk into new focus, where the committee had previously focused mostly on audit and finances. Risk is now a really critical component of the work this committee does and that Council requires it to do. With that, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. So all in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item 16.3, Community Satisfaction Survey 2023. McKenna, as our comms coordinator, I welcome you to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Every year the comms team has the pleasure of presenting the outcomes of the Community Satisfaction Survey, which includes the 97-page appendix to tonight's agenda. So firstly, some background. Most councils in Victoria undertake this survey research every year. It's administered by the Victorian Government's independent research company, who speaks with 400 locals to learn more about how we perform throughout the year across a range of services, from aged care and planning to waste management and community consultation. Council's 2023 community satisfaction results show relatively consistent community opinions with 2022. Most performance metrics have dipped slightly, however they do fall within the statistical margin of error, so are not overly concerning. Overall, council direction does show a decline in performance, though this rise and fall trend has been evident over the past decade. Worth celebrating is the fact that 20 out of 23 metrics outperformed the 2023 statewide averages by 5 points or more, demonstrating a high level of performance across a range of council services. I took a moment to speak with the JWS research representatives about our results, and they were able to offer some further insights into factors that are affecting councils across the state. The representative shared with me that all councils across Victoria have seen a drop in their results and have performed statistically lower on previous years. He attributed this to 4 things. 1, the cost of living crisis across the state and indeed the nation, attitudes in general towards government of all levels, delayed infrastructure projects, and population growth and migration changing communities. Even so, the Borough of Queenscliff overall's Council Performance Index score for 2023 was 66. For comparison, other small rural councils in Victoria have averaged 55, with the statewide average being 56, so we're doing all right there. Encouragingly, council has performed significantly higher than the small rural group and statewide average for councils on almost all service areas evaluated, as well as on overall performance. Even in council's 3 lowest rated service areas, building and planning permits, town planning policy and lobbying, council's performance is rated significantly higher than both group averages. So 2023 had some interesting insights for us to learn from, but overall there's some really good results in there. So what happens now? Officers will work to continue securing good outcomes, taking heed where there is an opportunity to learn from what might have changed in the past year and where we might be able to continue pursuing upward trends where possible for council performance. I've had the opportunity to present these findings to staff at our all-staff meeting, and have had further discussions with colleagues unpacking how we might be able to improve these metrics in the coming period. Tonight's summary has been a very brief summary of what is actually an extensive report. There are a lot of insights for us and our community in the document. I certainly encourage anyone interested to give it a good read over. The document is available as part of the minutes on the website if members of the community would like to access it in full. So, to that end, the recommendation is that Council notes the results of the 2023 Community Satisfaction Survey, and thanks those members of the community that took the time to share their feedback. I will just quickly add that it does take up to 10 minutes to respond to the survey call, so we really do appreciate the public taking the time to share their views.
Many thanks, McKenna. The recommendation, as McKenna notes, is to note the results and thank the members of the community who participated. Do I have someone to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Ebbels, and I've got Councillor Minty offering to second that. Councillor Ebbels, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I will, yes. Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst, and thank you, McKenna, for your report. And I guess reports like this is always what highlights what we can do better and what we need to be looking at. And I'm pleased that you're engaging with the staff as well to drill down into this study to find out what we can do better. And I did note that you mentioned that there was 400 responses, and obviously I think at the last council meeting I asked the question about making sure, because some people ring and they get after question 2 to be told, no, I can't actually ask you any more questions, because we need to make sure that we get young people answering them, we get middle-aged and elderly people, so we get a good mix of people within the borough. Also note that there's 400 in total respondents, which is the same for all councils. So whether you're in the City of Greater Geelong or some of the larger Melbourne Metro councils, it's still 400 people. So 400 people in the Borough of Queenscliff is a really good sample size. And just on the end, I'd just like to highlight the positive response to our library. I think it's been, as we know, it's been had a great response, and it's nice to hear the people who have been surveyed feel the same way as well. So it's been a worthwhile process, and congratulations to everyone concerned with the library. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. Councillor Minty, did you wish to speak to the motion?
I will. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to add to Councillor Ebbels' positive review of the survey. We often get sort of caught up in the minutiae of what we do at council level, and we get tied up with criticism or the lack of action or activity. And when you go to council, these type of council survey, and I have been with large councils as well, it really comes down to some really important areas. And I think in those important areas of supporting our people, our aging population, and supporting people in things like education and the bigger things that matter to people in their daily lives. I think all council staff and those who interact and interface with our residents on a regular basis should congratulate each other. I think it's a fantastic outcome, not only because we stand out amongst rural councils, small rural councils, but because we've been so consistent over time with our results. And I think that goes to show the quality of people we have and how hard they work. And yes, I know we all cop it from time to time, but I think these sorts of things really do give us pause for thought. And I'd like to again thank those staff and people who do most of the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Minty. Are there other councillors who wish to comment on this matter? I might use that opportunity then to additionally thank McKenna and the team involved in undertaking the survey. I appreciate you were really responsive to feedback from councillors and community, particularly several community members who were rebuffed perhaps once they were told that they reached a certain threshold and that the research company had garnered enough responses from a particular cohort. So reiterating the point that it is proportionate to our community and representative of that. I think it's a really interesting survey in a community like ours, which has a strong both resident and non-resident ratepayer community. And it was really interesting, if you do care to dive into the document, about how some of the issues that ranked positively for one group were sort of seen more negatively by the other, and vice versa. So it's a really interesting look for councils with split demographies or demographies who live in different ways in the community about how to change or re-examine service delivery, community engagement and strategic leadership with such groups. So it's great to see the positive results, and thank you and again the team for your work on this. There are no further comments on this item. I'll put it to the vote in its current form. So all in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Item 17, signing and sealing of documents. 17.0, provision of tree maintenance services panel contract 2023-02 with Asplund Tree Experts, TA Summit Open Space Services. So we have a recommendation here that Council note the use of the common seal on the provision of tree maintenance services panel contract 2023-02 to the aforementioned contractor on 19 July 2023. Do I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Ebbels, and I'm happy to second that motion. All in favour? Sorry, Councillor Grout. We're just considering item 17.
Yeah, do you need me to vote on that? I'm not aware of any detail behind this. So,
You wish to abstain from the vote? Thank you. So register, thank you, Jackie. The same perhaps will apply when we encounter item 17.1. So provision of tree maintenance services panel contract 2023-02 with Acorn Tree Services Pty Limited. So the recommendation is the same, that Council note the use of the common seal in the contract with Acorn Tree Services on 19 July 2023. Do I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Councillor Ebbels, thank you. And I'm happy to second that motion again. I'll put it to the vote if there are no comments. All in favour, and Councillor Grout, I'll remark as an abstaining again. Thank you. Item 18, questions without notice. 18.1, questions without notice status update. There are no questions without notice are outstanding. 18.2, questions without notice. And I'll now call for any questions without notice from the councillor cohort. I wish to put a question to the CEO, please, and it may be referred to Tim, in fact, but and that is to receive a detailed update on the progress of the application for 6 McDonald Road, including the peer review of the environmental report that was commissioned by Council.
Thank you, Mayor. We have been chasing for some time the peer report from Ecology and Heritage Partners. Council asked for back early in the year, so we're still waiting for that. And the most recent update as of last Friday was it was being reviewed by a senior advisor there. So as soon as we have that peer report, we'll present it to councillors for a briefing, so you can consider that report. In relation to the self-assessment, the applicant has done a self-assessment. They have not done a formal review of the federal authority, so that's basically not required to, so therefore the authority can't make a judgment on that because they haven't made a formal submission. So that's the situation. I think there's been some questions around the status between the self-assessment which the applicant has done and the fact that a formal review has not been lodged with the federal authority. So that's the sort of where matters are up there. Obviously when council receives the ecology report from Ecology and Heritage Partners, that will then give council information to make an assessment of how you wish to proceed with the application.
Thank you very much, Tim. There are no further questions. I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a list of council meetings. You can read that before you, but Wednesday 23 August is our next ordinary meeting of council. What's missing from this list is our next run of listening posts, which will be published in the Borough Bites and online, and thank you to those who've given feedback about the efficacy of various locations and times we've nominated, so they're a great opportunity to meet with your councillors in an informal capacity. Item 20 brings us to the closed session of meeting. So the recommendation is that the meeting now be closed to members of the public for consideration of the following confidential items: 20.9, the Community Grants 2023, and 20.10, Contract 2023-03, asbestos containing material replacement works for 4 Wharf Street, Queenscliff. Do I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Both up at this lightning fast. I'll say Councillor Minty is our mover and Councillor Ebbels is our seconder. And all in favour of now closing the meeting to the public? Thank you. Passed unanimously. So with that, we'll invite our members of the public to depart. Many thanks for joining us in the gallery this evening.
Recording stopped.
I get my Robert De Niro voice on.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now that we're back live, we have a recommendation that the decisions made in camera be ratified by Council as part of item 21, ratification of confidential items. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? I'm happy to move that. And Councillor Minty is the seconder. All in favour? Thank you. Passed unanimously. And that brings us to item 22, close of the meeting, and the time is 8:25, so I now declare this closed. Thank you to those who joined us in person and online.